The night had teeth. Wind screamed over the mountains like a wounded thing, carrying shards of ice that bit into Lyra's skin as she ran. Her lungs burned, her bare feet tore against the frozen earth, leaving streaks of blood behind her that the storm quickly devoured. The blizzard had been roaring for hours, swallowing sound, scent, and hope. It felt alive, cruel and deliberate, as if the very moon had turned her face away. Somewhere behind her, wolves howled. Not the kind that called to her blood, not the kind she once ran beside, but hunters. Her old pack. The ones who had cast her out, branded her cursed, and set her loose to die when the stars fell and her power burned too bright to hide. She could still feel the echo of their rejection like claws inside her ribs. Each breath came out ragged, steaming in the freezing air. Her body trembled, half from cold, half from the poison of memory. She didn't know how long she'd been running, minutes, hours, days, time dissolved in white noise and pain. Snow gathered in her lashes. Her vision swam. Lyra stumbled over a rock buried beneath the drifts and crashed hard into the ground. The world spun, a storm of silver and gray. She pushed herself up, shaking, and looked around. There was no shelter, no firelight. Only endless white, and the smell of iron. Blood. Not hers. She froze. The scent was thick, heavy, and close, cutting through the storm like a thread. Instinct made her head lift, made her heart kick harder. She followed it, half crawling, half staggering, until the shape appeared in the snow, a body, huge, dark-furred, barely breathing. A wolf. No, not just a wolf. The air shifted around him, even in his stillness. Power bled from him like heat, shimmering faintly under the snow. His fur was streaked with black and silver, his eyes closed, his sides heaving in shallow, uneven breaths. The scent of poison clung to him. Lyra's heart stumbled in her chest. She should walk away. She should run. This was no ordinary wolf, this was an alpha, and not just any alpha. She knew his scent from whispers, from fear that rippled through every pack for miles. Kale Draven. The Alpha King. The one who ruled the north with an iron will and a heart said to be colder than winter itself. And he was dying. Her instincts warred within her, fear, duty, curiosity, something deeper she didn't dare name. She should leave him. He'd kill her if he woke. He was her kind's executioner, the enforcer of the laws that had condemned her. But he was breathing raggedly now, choking softly, and when the wind shifted, she saw the wound, a jagged slash along his side, pulsing black with venom. Poisoned. Lyra's breath trembled out of her. For a long moment, she just knelt there, snow collecting on her torn cloak, staring at him. The storm raged around them, but a strange silence pressed between their hearts, a fragile, almost sacred pause. Then she moved. Her hands found his fur, thick and coarse, still warm beneath the ice. The moment her skin touched him, something surged up her arm, a pulse of heat that wasn't her own. She gasped, almost jerking back, but then she felt it again, faint, rhythmic. A heartbeat. And beneath it, something else, a whisper, ancient and unspoken. Her power stirred. The silver flame inside her, the one she'd buried since exile, flickered awake. Lyra pressed her hand harder against his wound, ignoring the sting of venom and the freezing pain that climbed her fingers. "Don't die here," she whispered hoarsely. "Not like this." Her voice was almost lost to the storm. The Alpha King didn't respond. But his breathing hitched, and that was enough. She tore strips from her cloak, wrapped them around his wound to slow the bleeding. Her fingers moved without thought, her body remembering old instincts of healing, of care, of loyalty to the pack that had long abandoned her. When the bandage was tight enough, she hesitated again. He was far too big to move. Twice her weight, maybe more. But leaving him wasn't an option her heart would obey. She looked at the horizon, there was no horizon. Just a blur of white and death. So she leaned down, pressed her forehead to his cold fur, and whispered, "If the Moon Mother still watches, guide my steps." Then she pulled his massive frame onto her shoulders. The weight nearly crushed her. Her knees buckled, her muscles screamed, but she didn't stop. Inch by inch, she rose, her breath tearing through the silence, and began to walk. 6 miles through a blizzard. 6 miles with the Alpha King bleeding onto her back, his life flickering like a candle flame. Every step was agony. Her legs burned, her vision blurred, her heart pounded so hard it felt like thunder in her ears. The snow blinded her, whipped her hair into her face, and froze her tears before they could fall. But she kept going. Because somewhere deep inside her, beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion, a small voice whispered, "He is not just a wolf. He is your test." The storm grew worse. The wind screamed, bending trees, shaking the mountains. Shadows moved in the whiteness, shapes that might have been rocks, might have been eyes. Lyra didn't look back. When she finally found the cave, a narrow gash of black stone half buried by snow, she nearly collapsed. She dragged Cale's body inside, away from the wind, and fell to her knees beside him. The cave smelled of damp stone and earth, safe but cold. Her body shook uncontrollably as she lit a small fire with trembling hands. The warmth crawled slowly over her skin, barely enough to thaw the frostbite creeping up her arms. She looked down at him, the Alpha King, stretched on the floor, breath shallow, face drawn with pain. Even in this half-human, half-wolf form, his presence filled the space. His jaw was clenched, veins dark under his skin, and the poison's shadow pulsed through him. He looked untouchable. Untamable. And yet so very breakable in this moment. Lyra reached for the pouch at her waist, her last few herbs, remnants of a healer's craft she was no longer supposed to practice. She crushed them between her palms, mixed them with melted snow, and pressed them against the wound. He groaned, low, rough, more beast than man. Her hands froze. His eyes opened. Golden. Bright as the moon through storm clouds. They locked on her, sharp and searching, and for a second she forgot how to breathe. The world seemed to fall away. Then his lips moved, barely. His voice was a rasp, rough and weak, but unmistakably commanding. "Who are you?" Lyra swallowed hard. "No one," she whispered. "Just someone who didn't want you to die." A muscle worked in his jaw. His gaze flicked to her torn cloak, the blood on her hands. "You should have left me." "I tried," she said softly. "But the storm wouldn't let me." For a long heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled quietly. The wind howled outside. Cale's eyes drifted closed again, but not before a strange expression passed over his face. Confusion, perhaps, or something dangerously close to gratitude. Lyra watched him, exhaustion washing over her in waves. She leaned back against the cave wall, drawing her knees to her chest. For the first time in days, the cold didn't feel quite so cruel. She studied the man who had been both legend and nightmare to her kind. He was supposed to be merciless. The king who silenced rebels and exiled omegas like her. Yet here he was, poisoned, helpless, and alive because of her. Fate had a wicked sense of humor. Outside, the storm howled louder, as if furious that she'd defied it. Lyra's head began to nod with exhaustion. She hadn't slept in days. But before she drifted off, she heard his voice again, softer now, dreamlike. "You have the mark," he murmured. Her heart stilled. "What?" His eyes didn't open. "Silver flame, in your blood." "I saw it." Her breath caught. She should deny it. She should lie. But words wouldn't come. Because somehow, even half dead, the Alpha King had seen the truth she'd buried from everyone, that she was the one the prophecy spoke of, the cursed child of the silver fire. And if he lived, he would know what that meant. The silence stretched between them, thick and fragile. Lyra turned her gaze to the flickering fire, her mind racing. He would heal. He would remember. And when he did, she would have to decide whether to run again, or face what the moon had chosen her for. But for now, she just let herself breathe. The wind outside began to ease, a lull in the chaos. Snow softened its roar into a whisper. The flames painted the cave walls in shifting amber light. Lyra's eyes drifted closed at last, her heartbeat syncing with his. And for a few fragile hours, the world stopped trying to kill her. Underscore 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 underscore. When morning came, the world lay buried under a sea of white. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind was almost worse. Lyra woke to find Kale still alive, though his skin burned with fever. She checked his bandage, replaced the herbs, and noticed something that made her heart lurch. The black veins had stopped spreading. The poison was weakening. He would live. And with that realization came fear. Because when the Alpha King rose, she would have to answer for what she was. She glanced at him, his face calmer now, lips parted slightly in sleep. Even at rest, there was power in him, an aura that demanded the world bend or break. But there was something else, too, a fragility she hadn't expected. She wondered what it felt like, to be feared by all and still be alone. Hours passed. The fire crackled low. She tried to leave once, to step outside, to breathe the cold air, but her body stopped her. Something held her there, an invisible tether she couldn't cut. When his breathing changed again, deeper, steadier, she turned. Kale's eyes were open, golden once more, watching her. "You stayed," he said. Lyra hesitated. "You were dying. And now?" She shrugged. "You're not." His gaze swept over her, unreadable. "You carried me." The statement was not a question, but she nodded anyway. 6 miles, he said quietly. "Through the storm." "How do you know?" He smiled, faint, dangerous, but real. "I felt every step." Lyra looked away, her cheeks warming despite the cold. "You should rest." "I should thank you," he said, voice rough but stronger now. "But I don't understand why you'd save me." "I know you're sent, Omega." Her heart stuttered. "Do you?" "Exiled. Alone. Branded." His eyes narrowed slightly. "And yet, you risked everything for your enemy." Lyra met his gaze, trembling but steady. "Maybe you're not my enemy." Kale's lips parted, but no words came. Instead, he just looked at her, truly looked, as if seeing something no one else had bothered to see in a long time. The silence between them shifted again. It wasn't cold anymore. Then his expression changed, a flicker of pain, confusion, something unguarded. "You should know," he murmured. "When a wolf carries another through death's storm, the bond does not forget." Lyra frowned. "What do you mean?" He closed his eyes, exhaling softly. "It means, you might regret it." Underscore 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 underscore. Lyra didn't sleep that night. She watched the fire, watched the Alpha King's chest rise and fall, and tried not to think about the strange warmth that had taken root inside her. It wasn't love. It couldn't be. It was survival. It was instinct. It was the impossible connection between two broken things fate had thrown together in a storm. But still, when the wind whispered through the cave mouth, it sounded almost like a promise. And somewhere in the distance, under the silver light of a fading moon, the prophecy stirred, waiting. Underscore 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 underscore. Thrown into chaos, the old seers used to say, is how all stories worth remembering begin. Lyra didn't know it yet, but the night she carried the poisoned wolf through the blizzard was the night destiny changed its course. It was the night a cursed Omega met the Alpha King, not as enemies, not as prey and predator, but as two souls walking the edge between death and redemption. And when morning came, the world would never be the same. Underscore 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 underscore. If this story touched something inside you, subscribe to Moon King Chronicles. Because here, we tell tales that burn, and heals. The storm had died, but its memory clung to the world like a ghost. Outside, the forest lay buried beneath silence. Each branch held its breath beneath the weight of snow, and even the wind seemed afraid to disturb what remained. Inside the cave, the air was thick with the mingled scent of fire ash, blood, and something unspoken, the faint, raw electricity that existed when two souls brushed too close to fate. Lyra sat near the dying fire, her fingers tracing circles into the frost at her feet. She hadn't spoken since dawn. The Alpha King hadn't either. But silence, she'd learned, could be its own kind of conversation. Kale's breathing was steadier now, no longer the jagged rhythm of a dying man. The fever had broken sometime before sunrise, though the chill in his skin said the poison hadn't yet released its grip completely. His body, all scars and sinew, carried the map of a life lived in battle. She wondered how many of those wounds he'd earned protecting others, and how many he'd inflicted. Her gaze lingered on him longer than it should have. There was something unsettling about seeing the most feared wolf in the north so still, so human. And then, as if feeling her eyes on him, Kale stirred. His voice was rough when he spoke, but lower now, less guarded. "You're watching me again." Lyra blinked, startled. "I thought you were asleep." "I was," he said. "Until your heartbeat grew loud enough to wake the dead." A flush of heat crawled up her neck. "You can hear that?" "Everything," he murmured. "Even the things you're trying not to feel." Her chest tightened. She looked away, toward the cave mouth where sunlight began to spill across the snow. "Then you must know I'm afraid." "Of me?" "Of what comes next." Kale was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, "You should be." Lyra turned her head sharply. His golden eyes caught hers again, steady, unreadable, but burning with a faint light. "Why did you help me?" he asked. She frowned. "You were dying." "That's not an answer." She hesitated, searching for words she didn't fully understand. "Because I couldn't watch something else die when I could stop it. Because maybe, saving someone was the only thing left that made me feel human." Kale's gaze softened, just barely. "Human," he repeated. "That's not what you are, is it?" Lyra's breath caught. "No," she whispered. "Not anymore." For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire popped once, sparks rising into the air like tiny ghosts. Then Kale said, quietly, "You said something last night. About the storm not letting you leave." Lyra nodded slowly. It felt alive. Like it wanted us both here. His brow furrowed. "Storms don't want things." "Maybe not ordinary ones," she said. "But this was different." Kale's eyes flickered, a hint of recognition, or perhaps dread. "You believe the old ways then?" "The mother's will." "Prophecy." She gave a half laugh, brittle and tired. "I believe in surviving." Prophecy doesn't tend to favor wolves like me. What are you? He asked again, this time not as a demand but almost as a plea. Lyra stared at the fire. The answer burned in her throat. Once, she'd had a pack. Once, she'd been the daughter of a beta healer, gentle, quiet, meant for nothing more than tending wounds and whispering prayers to the moon. But the night her shift came, it hadn't been gentle. It had been fire. Silver fire. The kind that made the earth tremble and the elders whisper that something ancient had awoken inside her. She remembered their faces, fear, awe, disgust. The way their eyes had turned cold. The way her father had bowed his head when they cast her out. She hadn't seen him since. Lyra's hands clenched around her knees. I was born under the wrong moon, she said softly. And my pack decided that made me dangerous. Cale's gaze didn't move from her face. Dangerous how? She met his eyes, and in them saw no judgment, only quiet curiosity. When I shift, I lose control. The fire, it burns everything it touches. I killed a hunter once, one of ours. I didn't mean to. Her voice broke. But they said the fire was a curse. Said I would bring ruin if I stayed. Silence fell again. Cale leaned back slowly, his expression unreadable. And you believe them? I used to, she said. Now I just believe I don't belong anywhere. For the first time, something like empathy crossed his face. It softened the edges of him, made the harsh lines of power seem almost human. You carried me through a storm that would have killed most alphas. I'd say that's belonging to something. Lyra looked at him, really looked, and saw a flicker of pain there that wasn't physical. And you? She asked quietly. What do you believe in? He turned his gaze to the fire. Duty. Strength. And lately, doubt. There was weight in that word, and she could feel it settle between them. Cale shifted, wincing as he tried to sit up. Lyra reached out instinctively to help him, but he caught her wrist midair. His grip was warm, steady, unyielding. Don't, he said softly. If you touch me again, I'm not sure I'll let go. The cave seemed to shrink around them. Lyra could hear her own heartbeat again, loud, frantic, alive. Cale's eyes searched hers, and for a moment she saw something ancient flicker there. Something that scared her more than his power ever could. Then, slowly, he released her. Thank you, he said, voice rough. For not letting me die. Lyra swallowed, her throat tight. You're welcome. He leaned back, exhaustion claiming him again. Rest. We'll need to move when the light falls. Where? There's a place I must see, he murmured. A shrine older than the packs. The old blood runs strong there. Lyra frowned. Why? Because, Cale said, his eyes closing, if what I saw in your flame is real, then the world just changed. Underscore 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 underscore. When Cale's breathing evened out again, Lyra stayed awake, her mind spinning. A shrine. The old blood. The prophecy. She didn't want to believe any of it, yet the moment he spoke, she'd felt something stir deep inside, the same pull she'd felt when the storm pushed her toward him. The moon was never subtle. Hours later, when the sun began to sink and the shadows turned blue, Lyra helped him to his feet. His strength had returned faster than she expected. The wound still oozed faintly, but his movements were sure, his balance steady. He walked like a king, even half-broken. As they stepped out into the open, the forest greeted them in shimmering silence. Every branch sparkled under the weight of ice, every breath turned to glitter in the cold air. The world felt reborn, fragile, waiting. They moved slowly, Cale's hand sometimes brushing her shoulder for balance. Each touch sent a tremor through her chest, sharp and warm against the cold. After an hour of trudging through the snow, the trees began to thin. The air changed, heavier, older. Lyra felt it first, a low hum beneath her skin. "What is this place?" she whispered. Cale's gaze swept the clearing ahead. The Heartwood. The first ground blessed by the moon. The forest opened before them like a breath. In the center stood a stone altar carved with ancient runes, half buried in frost. The moonlight that filtered through the branches above struck the altar directly, glowing faintly silver. Cale stopped at the edge of the clearing. His eyes darkened, awe and wariness warring on his face. This is where it began. Lyra stepped closer, her pulse quickening. "Where what began?" "The prophecy," he said. "The one every alpha fears and every seer denies." He turned to her, his voice lower now. "The prophecy of the silver flame." Her breath caught. She'd heard the name before, whispered among exiled omegas, used as both curse and prayer. But no one had ever spoken it openly. Cale continued, his gaze distant. "It says that one born with the moon's fire will rise when the packs are divided. That her power will burn away the old order, and crown the new." Lyra's knees felt weak. "And you think that's me?" He met her eyes, gold catching the moonlight. "I don't think. I know." The air around them seemed to thrum, the forest itself listening. Lyra shook her head. "You don't understand. That power, it's not a gift. It destroys." Cale stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking until she could feel the heat of him. "Everything that creates must destroy something first." She opened her mouth to argue, but the ground beneath the altar shuddered. A faint hum rose from the stones, deep and resonant, echoing through the trees. The symbols began to glow, soft silver at first, then brighter, pulsing in rhythm with Lyra's heartbeat. Cale froze. "It's responding to you." Lyra stumbled back, panic flaring. "No, it's not." The light surged, blinding. A rush of warmth exploded through her chest, racing down her arms. The mark on her wrist, a faint crescent she'd been born with, burned white-hot. She cried out, dropping to her knees. Cale caught her before she fell completely, his arms wrapping around her shoulders. "Lyra." His voice cut through the roar of power. "Breathe. Don't fight it." "I can't." Her body trembled violently, the light consuming her from within. Images flashed behind her eyes, fire, wolves, a crown of silver, a battlefield drenched in moonlight. And then, a voice. "Child of the flame, do not fear what you are." The light dimmed as quickly as it had come. Lyra collapsed against Cale's chest, her heart racing. The runes faded back to stillness, their glow dying out one by one. Cale held her tightly, his breath warm against her ear. "It's real," he whispered. "The prophecy is real." Lyra looked up at him, eyes wide and wet. "Then I'm doomed." Cale shook his head. "No. You're chosen." She wanted to believe him, she wanted it more than she'd ever admit. But the fear was stronger, heavier. Because if destiny had truly found her, it would not let her go. Underscore 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 underscore. And somewhere deep within the frozen earth, something ancient stirred, a pulse answering the call of the silver flame. It would not be long before others felt it. Before the world began to move against them. But for now, beneath the quiet light of the moon, an Omega and an Alpha stood at the edge of history, their fates tangled in a prophecy neither yet understood. The night deepened around them. The world seemed to hold its breath, as if afraid to interrupt what had just awakened. Cale still held her, his hands steady at the back of her neck, grounding her. Lyra could feel the thunder of his pulse through his skin, steady, powerful, alive. Slowly, she drew in a trembling breath and pushed away from him, though part of her didn't want to. The cave firelight from before was gone now, only moonlight and memory illuminated their faces. "I told you," she whispered, voice hoarse. "I bring ruin." Kale shook his head. "You brought light. That light nearly tore me apart." "Then learn to wield it," he said simply, his tone low but fierce. "Fire doesn't destroy by nature, it destroys because no one taught it mercy." Lyra's gaze fell. "And you think you can teach me mercy?" He smiled faintly, not with arrogance, but with something that looked almost like sorrow. "No. But I can teach you control." A silence settled again, not cold but thick with everything neither dared to name. When Lyra finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of years. "Why do you care? You barely know me. You're an alpha king, I'm just a stray." Kale's eyes softened. "I was a stray once too." She looked up sharply, but he'd already turned away, walking toward the glowing altar. His silhouette moved like a shadow between worlds. "When I was born," he said quietly, "my pack called me cursed. The firstborn of two bloodlines meant to be enemies. My mother was Omega-born, from the Vale of Ash. My father, the Iron Alpha. Their bond broke the law." Lyra listened, breath held. "They thought I'd die before my first shift," Kale continued. "Instead, the moon marked me. Gold eyes where none had them before. A gift and a warning." He paused, his voice dropping. "I spent half my life proving I was strong enough to lead, and the other half wondering what part of me they were right to fear." He looked back at her then, the moonlight catching in his hair. "Maybe that's why I care, Lyra. Because I see in you the same fire that nearly destroyed me, and the same chance to turn it into something greater." Lyra's throat tightened. "You make it sound so simple." "It isn't," he admitted. "But it's possible." She turned her gaze toward the altar. "Then tell me, what happens now?" Kale's jaw tightened. "Now, the others will feel the awakening. Every seer from the northern tribes to the southern plains will know the silver flame has risen. And they'll come for me." He met her eyes. "They'll come for us." Lyra's breath caught at that single word, us. It wasn't a promise, not yet. But it was more than she'd ever been offered before. The cold crept deeper as the moon climbed higher. They made camp near the heartwood, Kale insisting she rest while he kept watch. But sleep came in fragments, her dreams tangled with fire and silver and a face she didn't recognize, a woman cloaked in light, whispering words she couldn't remember when she woke. When dawn broke, pale and fragile, Kale was already standing at the edge of the clearing, scanning the horizon. "Something's wrong," he murmured. Lyra rose quickly, heart pounding. "What is it?" He didn't answer at first. His head tilted, listening. Then his expression hardened. "Tracks. 4. Maybe 5. Wolves. They've been following us since the storm." Lyra's stomach twisted. "Hunters?" "No. Worse." He turned to her, his tone all command now. "Move quickly. We can't stay here." They gathered what little they had and slipped through the trees, the snow crunching softly underfoot. Lyra could sense it too now, a presence at their backs, faint but persistent, like a whisper at the edge of thought. Hours passed in silence until Kale halted suddenly, hand raised. Lyra froze beside him. The forest was too still. Then, a low growl, deep and familiar, rolled through the air. Kale's eyes flashed gold. Ravagers. Before Lyra could ask, the first shadow lunged from the trees. Massive, twisted wolves, their fur blackened with rot, eyes burning red with madness. Creatures of bloodlust, no longer bound by the moon's mercy. Kale shoved Lyra aside as one struck, claws tearing through the air. He met it mid-leap, shifting mid-motion, his form exploding into that of the great golden alpha. Lyra stumbled back, eyes wide. Even wounded, Kale's power was breathtaking, his body moved with lethal grace, every strike deliberate. But there were too many. 3 more burst through the trees, circling, snarling. Lyra's instinct screamed. Her pulse thundered. The fire beneath her skin stirred. She tried to push it down. Not here. Not again. But then Kale roared, a sound of both fury and pain, and something inside her broke. The fire surged up her spine, white-hot. Her vision blurred. The world went gold and silver. She felt the shift tear through her, not like before, not chaos but surrender. The fire wasn't wild this time. It was calling. Her wolf emerged, white fur streaked with light, eyes glowing like molten moonstone. The ravagers hesitated, confusion flickering in their feral eyes. Lyra's snarl shook the snow from the trees. Kale turned, recognition flashing through his wolf's gaze. Together, they moved, 2 forces of nature intertwined. Her fire met his fury. Every step burned the air around them. When she struck, her claws left trails of silver flame. When he bit, the earth cracked under the weight of his power. When the last ravager fell, the forest went still again. Smoke rose from the snow where her fire had kissed it, faint and shimmering. Lyra stood panting, trembling, her wolf form fading back into flesh. Kale shifted beside her, chest heaving, blood on his shoulder. She turned to him, fear and awe warring in her gaze. Did I hurt you? He shook his head, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. No. You saved me. Her knees nearly buckled. He caught her before she could fall, holding her close, his breath warm against her temple. I told you, he murmured, voice raw. Fire doesn't destroy by nature. Lyra clung to him, the tears she'd been holding back spilling free. I don't want this power, she whispered. I just want peace. Kale's arms tightened around her. Then we'll make peace from what we have. Together. She looked up at him, eyes meeting gold. There was no command in his voice now, no king's authority. Only a man who'd spent too long fighting alone. For the first time in years, she let herself believe him. They stayed there for a long while, 2 broken souls beneath the endless snow, breathing the same air, bound by something neither could name yet. And far above them, the moon shifted in her sky. Underscore 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 underscore. But elsewhere, in the marble halls of the northern palace, a seer woke screaming. Her eyes bled silver as she gasped for air, clutching at the mark that burned across her chest. She's risen, the seer whispered, trembling. The silver flame, she's found the king. And in that moment, the first shadow of war began to stir. Underscore 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 underscore. Back in the forest, Lyra and Kale walked in silence. Every step carried them farther from the past and closer to something neither could fully see, a destiny neither had chosen but could no longer escape. When dusk fell, they found a ridge overlooking the valley. From there, the world stretched endless and white beneath a dying sun. Kale sat beside her, his expression unreadable. When this began, he said, I thought I'd been sent to hunt the traitors who defied the crown. I didn't expect to find the reason the crown exists at all. Lyra looked at him, brow furrowed. What do you mean? He turned his head slowly. You think the moon gave power to the alphas because of our strength. But strength is nothing without balance. The prophecy was never about domination, it was about unity. The flame and the fang. The flame, she whispered. And the Fong. He nodded. Together, or nothing. The words lingered in the air, heavy, sacred. Lyra looked out at the horizon, her heart full and aching. Somewhere beyond that frozen expanse lay the packs that had cast her out, the families that would soon learn her name. For the first time, she wasn't running from what she was. The fire inside her no longer felt like a curse. It felt like a heartbeat, ancient, alive, waiting. Kale rose and extended a hand toward her. Come. The world won't wait for us to be ready. She took it without hesitation. Their fingers met, warm against the cold. And as they descended the ridge together, the first light of dawn broke across the snow, soft, gold, and full of promise. Dawn broke like a bruise across the sky, violet at the edges, silver where the sun tried to pierce the storm's remains. The forest slept beneath a crust of ice, branches bending under frost. Kale and Lyra moved through it in silence, their breath misting the air between them. Every sound felt too loud. The world after battle always did, when the killing stopped, but the earth still hummed with the memory of claws and blood. Kale walked a few paces ahead, his shoulders squared beneath the cloak she'd mended from the torn hides. His stride was steady but slower than usual, the wound along his ribs hadn't fully healed. Lyra watched the way his hand occasionally brushed his side, how his jaw tightened each time he drew breath. Should you be walking this far? She asked. He didn't look back. If we rest too long, they'll find our trail. Who? He hesitated, just long enough to tell her he already knew. The ones who sent the Ravagers. Lyra's stomach nodded. The Council? The High Circle, perhaps. Or one of the lesser alphas trying to impress them. His tone hardened. Either way, someone wants the silver flame silenced before word spreads. They reached the ridge where the forest gave way to open plain. Wind tore at their cloaks, the valley below glittered like shards of broken glass. In the distance, spires of the northern palace rose from the fog, white stone veined with black, catching the light like teeth. Lyra drew in a slow breath. It's smaller than I imagined. Kale glanced at her. That's because you're seeing the surface. Most of it lies beneath the mountain. The dungeons. The arenas. The council hall. Where they condemned me. He nodded once. And where we'll find answers. They began the descent. Snow crunched underfoot, and with each step, the weight of what waited ahead pressed harder. Hours passed before they stopped beside a half-frozen stream. Lyra knelt, cupped water in her palms, and drank. The cold bit at her lips, sharp and clean. When she looked up, Kale was watching the tree line again. You hear something? She asked quietly. He shook his head. I smell something. Before she could respond, the wind shifted, and the stench hit her too, iron, sweat, and the faint rot of magic gone wrong. Kale's hand went to the hilt strapped across his back. Stay behind me. The first arrow hissed through the air, striking the snow an inch from her knee. Lyra's body reacted before thought, dropping low, eyes flashing silver. Kale spun, drawing his blade in one smooth motion. Figures moved between the trees, 6, maybe 7, cloaked in gray, their scent unmistakable. Blood sentinels, Kale growled. Lyra had heard of them, fanatics sworn to the High Circle, wolves who'd surrendered their free will for power. They hunted anyone the council deemed a threat. The leader stepped forward, hood falling back to reveal scarred flesh and eyes the color of frost. Alpha Kale, he called, voice calm, almost reverent. You shouldn't be here. Kale's answer was a low rumble. And yet here I am. The sentinel smiled thinly. You've broken the oath. You shelter the outcast. His gaze slid to Lyra, cold and assessing. The silver flame. Lyra's pulse quickened. She's under my protection, Kale said. She's under judgment. Kale moved first. The snow exploded beneath him as he shifted mid-charge, gold light flooding the clearing. The sentinels met him halfway, claws gleaming, their own forms half-shifted. Lyra's instinct screamed to run, but she didn't. She couldn't. The memory of Kale's blood on the snow burned behind her eyes. She let the fire rise. It answered her instantly, silver flames licking along her arms, heat pulsing with her heartbeat. She drew it inward, shaping it, remembering his words, "Fire doesn't destroy by nature." The first sentinel reached her. She spun aside, palm striking his chest. Silver fire flared, and he screamed as the heat ate through his armor but not his flesh, leaving him gasping, stunned but alive. Control. Mercy. Kale fought like a storm, each movement deliberate, ruthless. 2 sentinels fell beneath his claws before the rest hesitated, regrouping. The leader shouted something in an ancient tongue, and suddenly the air shimmered. The snow darkened, stained with black sigils that pulsed under their feet. Kale froze mid-step, a snarl tearing from his throat. The spell rooted him in place. "Kale!" Lyra cried. The leader turned to her, blood trickling from his lip. The prophecy said the silver flame would bow before the crown. Lyra's power surged again, uncontrolled. The sigils flared brighter, but then she remembered the cave, the way Kale had held her, the calm in his voice. She dropped to her knees, palms flat on the snow, and breathed. The flame moved with her breath, flowing out instead of erupting. It threaded through the spellwork, silver meeting black. The 2 colors twisted together, and shattered. The ground exploded in light. Kale lunged free, slamming into the leader, sending him sprawling. In a heartbeat the others broke, fleeing into the woods, their retreat swallowed by the storm. Silence. The only sound was Lyra's ragged breathing. Kale shifted back, blood streaking his face, golden eyes blazing. "You did it." She blinked, disbelieving. "I broke a high circle binding." "You bent it." His grin was faint but genuine. "No one's ever done that before." Lyra's hands trembled. "They'll come again." "I know." He glanced toward the horizon. "And we'll be ready." They gathered what they could from the fallen sentinels, maps, talismans, and a single crest burned into a strip of leather, the mark of the high circle. Kale turned it over in his hand. "This isn't just a warning. It's a declaration." Lyra frowned. "Of war?" He met her gaze. "Of fear. They're afraid of what you've awakened." Underscore 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 underscore. As dusk returned, they reached the edge of the plains. In the distance, the palace torches shimmered like stars fallen to earth. Between them and that light lay miles of open snow. And the knowledge that every shadow might hide another hunter. Kale adjusted his cloak and glanced at Lyra. "Once we cross that valley, there's no turning back." Lyra looked toward the palace, her expression unreadable. "Then let's not turn back." And together, they stepped into the wind. The storm had moved west by nightfall, leaving the world blanketed in silence. The moon hung low and swollen, its light silvering the plain before the northern palace. Kale and Lyra crept through the frozen marshes, cloaks drawn tight. The wind had teeth, biting at exposed skin, but neither slowed. They had been walking for hours, guided by the faint glow of the palace spires. "Keep low," Kale murmured. "The outer walls are guarded by the obsidian guard. Their senses rival ours." Lyra nodded, following his lead. She could hear the faint hum of magic in the air, wards laid centuries ago. They buzzed faintly against her flame. She whispered, "You feel that?" "Yes." "Old magic. High circle work." He paused, studying the runes etched into a frozen stone nearby. "We can't break through without alerting them." "Then we don't break through." Kale glanced back, frowning. Meaning? Lyra pressed her palm to the rune. Silver light flickered faintly. We go under. It took them another hour to find the tunnel, a collapsed drainage channel half buried in ice. The air inside was foul, thick with the smell of decay and rust, but it led straight beneath the palace grounds. Kale went first, shoulders scraping the frozen walls. Lyra followed, light pulsing faintly in her hand to guide them through the dark. At one point, the tunnel widened into an ancient catacomb. Columns carved with wolf sigils rose from the floor, and between them lay rows of stone coffins. The air was colder here, heavier with memory. Kale brushed his hand along one of the coffins. The first bloodborn. The founders of our line. Lyra's eyes softened. You still honor them? I honor what they were, not what we became. She could feel the bitterness in his voice. It was the same ache she carried, an ache for what was lost, what was twisted by greed. A faint sound broke the silence, a drip, steady and too rhythmic to be water. Kale raised a hand. Stay behind me. From the shadows ahead came movement, slow, deliberate. Then a figure stepped forward, wrapped in black robes embroidered with crimson threads. Kale of the Iron Blood, the stranger said softly. You walk in forbidden halls. Kale's muscles tensed. Who are you? The figure lowered the hood, revealing a woman's face, ageless, eyes the color of molten gold. I am Ceres, she said. High Seer of the Circle. Lyra's pulse jumped. You're one of them. Ceres smiled faintly. One of the few who remember truth. You should not have come. Kale's tone sharpened. Then why wait here? To warn us? Or to stop us? Neither, she said. To offer you a choice. Lyra's voice trembled. What kind of choice? The same one your mother made, Silver Flame. Lyra froze. My mother? Ceres stepped closer, her gaze soft but unreadable. You carry her light. Her defiance. She stood here once, beneath these stones. She too tried to change the fate of the bloodborn. Kale turned sharply to Lyra. You never told me your mother was. She died when I was 8, Lyra whispered. I thought she was just a healer. Ceres's expression darkened. She was much more. She was the first to see what the circle was becoming. The first to resist the crown's corruption. And for that, she was silenced. The word struck like a blade. Lyra stepped back, shaking her head. No. That can't be. Kale's jaw clenched. Why tell us now? Because, Ceres said quietly, the same poison that killed her now runs in you, Kale. The world seemed to tilt. Lyra turned toward him, eyes wide. What? Ceres continued, calm as a whisper. The wound you took, the claws of the Ravager. They were coated with Veritha's blood, a toxin crafted by the High Circle. It doesn't kill instantly. It lingers. Corrupts. Kale's hand went instinctively to his side. The pain had grown worse in the past days. He'd ignored it, thinking it was simply healing. But now, he could feel it burning. Lyra moved toward him, panic rising. There has to be a cure. Ceres shook her head. There is one. But it is costly. What cost? Kale demanded. Your fire, Ceres said, turning to Lyra. Only the Silver Flame can purge it. But if she does, she burns herself in the process. Lyra froze, heart hammering. No. Kale's eyes darkened. Then it's not an option. Ceres looked between them, sorrow in her gaze. The choice is yours. But remember, what you do here will echo through the bloodlines. The council is moving. The crown hungers for the flame. If you reach the throne hall before dawn, you might still stop what's coming. She stepped back into the shadows. Choose wisely, Alpha. Choose bravely, Silver Flame. And then she was gone. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Cale broke the silence. You're not doing it. Lyra looked up at him. If I don't, you'll die. I've lived enough lifetimes to know this isn't how it ends for me. She shook her head, voice trembling. You don't know that. He took her hands, pressing them to his chest. His heartbeat was strong but uneven. Listen. You gave me life once already. Don't take yours for mine. Her throat tightened. Cale. He smiled faintly. We get to the throne. We finish this. Then, maybe, I'll rest. The tunnel shook suddenly, dust raining from the ceiling. From above came the sound of distant horns. Lyra stiffened. They know we're here. Cale released her hands, jaw set. Then we don't waste another second. They ran. Through the tunnels, up the stairways of cold stone, until at last they emerged into the undercourts of the palace. The marble gleamed like bone under torchlight. Every corridor smelled of incense and old power. Statues lined the walls, each depicting a wolf with a crown, each inscription bearing the same words. Order above all. Cale muttered, that's what they always feared, chaos. Freedom. Lyra's flames flickered faintly as they moved. She could feel something pulling her forward, something old, familiar, almost maternal. The great doors of the council hall loomed ahead. Black oak bound in silver. Cale placed a hand on the metal. Once we go in. There's no turning back, Lyra finished. Together, they pushed the doors open. The chamber inside was vast, circular, lit by hundreds of floating candles. 13 thrones encircled a central dais, and on each throne sat a figure draped in shadow and steel. At the center, beneath a banner of gold, sat the High Lord of the Circle. Cale's voice was low, controlled. You sent your beasts after us. The High Lord rose slowly. You broke exile, Alpha. You consort with a heretic. You stand before judgment. Lyra stepped forward, fire flickering at her palms. I'm not the heretic. You are. You poisoned your own kind. You twisted the fire meant to heal into a weapon. A murmur rippled through the council. The High Lord's gaze turned cold. And what will you do, child of flame? Burn us all? Lyra's eyes glowed brighter. If that's what it takes to end the curse, then yes. Cale moved beside her, voice steady but heavy with conviction. You speak of judgment. Then judge me too. I defied your order because I saw what you've become, cowards hiding behind crowns. The High Lord's expression didn't change. Then you will share her fate. He raised his hand, and the floor erupted in light. Runes flared around Cale and Lyra, forming a cage of golden fire. The air vibrated with ancient energy. Cale dropped to his knees, the toxin flaring through his veins. Lyra reached for him, but her power faltered under the weight of the spell. Cale. He looked up at her through the haze, voice hoarse. Do it. What? The cure. Do it now, before they finish the binding. Tears burned in her eyes. If I do, I'll. Lyra. His tone softened, almost a whisper. I can't hold them much longer. You said once that fire doesn't destroy, it transforms. She shook her head violently. Cale, please. He smiled faintly. Then let me be the proof of that. The runes pulsed brighter, the sound of chanting rising from the circle. Lyra's breath caught. She could feel his heartbeat fading beneath her hands. She closed her eyes. And let the fire come. It rose from within, not in anger this time, but in surrender. It flowed through her veins, silver and gold intertwining. She drew Cale's face to hers and pressed her forehead against his. I love you, she whispered. The fire burst outward, flooding the chamber. The council screamed. The runes shattered. The world became light. And then, silence. When the brightness faded, Lyra was gone. Only a faint shimmer of silver remained where she had knelt. Cale lay on the cold stone floor, chest rising weakly. The poison was gone. The wound closed. But his heart. He reached for the air where she had been, his hand trembling. And in the faint echo of her fire, he heard her voice. "You'll find me in the dawn, Cale. Always." Silence. That was the first thing Cale felt when consciousness clawed its way back to him. Not the sharp silence of fear, but the heavy, sacred stillness that comes after something greater than war. After something final. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the council hall. The marble had cracked open, the thrones lay in ruin, and above him, dawn was breaking through the shattered dome. Rays of light pierced the drifting smoke, touching the dust like hands of gold. He tried to move. His limbs trembled. The scent of burned air clung to him, ozone, ash, and something faintly sweet. Her scent. Lyra. Her name hit him like a blade to the ribs. He turned, searching the wreckage, calling her softly at first, then louder. "Lyra." Nothing. Only the wind whispering through broken arches. Where she had stood, there was a faint pool of silver light, like dew under moonlight, rippling softly, alive but fading. He crawled toward it on shaking hands. The light warmed his skin, thrummed against his heartbeat. It pulsed once, twice, like a goodbye. And then, it dissolved into the air. Cale bowed his head, fingers curling against the cold stone. "No." His voice cracked, breaking into the emptiness. He stayed there for a long time. Maybe hours. Maybe days. The sun climbed, fell, climbed again. The ruin around him became a graveyard of memory. But even as grief consumed him, something deeper stirred. The poison was gone. His veins no longer burned. The curse that bound his line, the darkness that had eaten through generations of blood-born alphas, was gone. And he knew who had taken it. "Lyra," he whispered again, softer now, almost reverent. When he finally rose, his eyes had changed. The crimson gleam that marked his line had dulled to a muted gold. The mark of corruption was gone. He was clean, reborn through her fire. He walked through the ruins, slow and deliberate. The halls that once echoed with chants now stood silent, empty. The High Lord's crown lay shattered among the ash. He picked it up, staring at its broken silver frame. Then, without a word, he crushed it in his palm. The sound was soft, final. He turned toward the open sky and breathed in the dawn. Underscore 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 underscore. Days passed. Then weeks. The palace fell to ruin. The bloodborn scattered. Rumors spread of a lone wolf wandering the northern plains, a ghost with eyes like the sun and a heart that refused to die. Cale rebuilt what he could. Not the palace, not the thrones. Those were relics of pain. He built instead a refuge. A small, sacred place in the foothills, where the mountain met the mist. A place where orphans, exiles, and shifters without packs could come. Where no one bowed, and no one ruled. They called it Sanctum Hollow. And for the first time in generations, wolves of rival bloodlines shared one fire. At night, Cale would sit outside beneath the stars, staring northward. Sometimes, when the wind shifted, he thought he heard her voice in it. Soft, teasing, familiar. "You promised you'd rest." He'd smile faintly. "And you promised you'd stay." But she did stay, in every spark that rose from the fire, in every wolf that learned to forgive their own rage. The world healed slowly. So did he. underscore 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 underscore. One winter night, nearly a year after the fall of the council, a storm rolled in, gentle at first, then wild. The wind howled across the cliffs, and the wolves of the hollow huddled close around the flames. Cale stood at the edge of the cliff, cloak snapping around him. The moon was bright through the storm, full and vast. And then, he saw her. A figure made of light, faint as breath, standing at the tree-lean. Lyra. Her hair glowed silver, her eyes soft and endless as the stars. He took one step forward, heart pounding. Lyra? The wind answered in whispers, carrying her voice, real and not real, near and far. You kept your word. He swallowed hard. You kept mine. Her smile flickered through the mist. You gave them peace, Cale. That was the destiny you feared. He shook his head, eyes wet. It was never mine alone. No, she said softly. It was ours. Lightning flashed, casting her form in shimmering light. You'll lead them well, Alpha. But don't forget, fire doesn't end. It changes shape. He reached for her, hand trembling. But she stepped back into the glow, her outline dissolving into the silver rain. When the next dawn breaks, look east. And then she was gone. The storm faded with her, leaving the night quiet once more. Cale stood there until the first light of dawn spilled across the horizon. And when it did, he saw it. On the farthest ridge, where sunlight touched snow, a silver wolf stood watching him. Beautiful. Fierce. Free. She lifted her head and howled, a sound that rolled across the valley, carrying warmth instead of sorrow. Cale closed his eyes, let the sound fill him. And when he opened them again, the hollow below shimmered in that same light. The wolves stirred, lifted their own voices in reply. For the first time in living memory, their howls weren't for war. They were for life. Underscore 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 underscore. Seasons turned. The scars of battle became whispers of legend. And the story of the silver flame and the redeemed Alpha spread across packs, across mountains, across generations. Mothers told it to their pups by the fire. Lone travelers carried it in songs. And every time someone whispered the words, silver flame, a spark lit in their chest, a reminder of love that defied death, and redemption born from loss. Cale lived many more years, his hair silvering, his steps slower, but his eyes never losing that light. When he finally lay down beneath the stars for the last time, he smiled, because he could see her. Not as flame. Not as shadow. But as dawn. Underscore 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 underscore. Some fires never fade. They don't need to. Because when love is real, when it burns pure, it becomes light. And that light is eternal. If this story touched your heart, if you felt her pain, his redemption, their fire, then remember this. Subscribe to Moon King Chronicles. Because here, we tell tales that burn. Tales of broken souls finding their way home. Tales of wolves who remember what it means to love, even after the storm.